Imagine stepping into a box that's like 145 degrees. And instead of feeling like you're suffocating inside a volcano, your blood pressure drops, your muscles loosen, and your seasonal depression actually starts to lift.
Which sounds completely wild, right?
Right. I mean, whenever the phrase home wellness gets thrown around, we usually picture a billionaire's architectural digest mansion. You know, you picture a cold plunge carved out of a glacier in this massive steaming cedar room that took like a team of specialized contractors 6 months to build.
Yeah, we totally associate that level of physiological recovery with stressful, high-end home renovations. The assumption is always that creating a dedicated space for heat therapy requires tearing open drywall, upgrading your electrical panel, and draining your savings account.
It is the ultimate paradox. Like the thing that is supposed to relieve your stress requires you to live in an instruction zone for a month.
Exactly. It completely defeats the purpose.
So today we're looking at how a few pieces of Canadian hemlock wood and some carbon film are attempting to basically replace those $20,000 spa renovations. We're doing a deep dive into the Westinghouse 2-person Bluetooth-compatible FRR infrared sauna.
And we've got a lot of great sources today, including a detailed product review, the technical specs, and imagery of the unit itself.
Yeah. So the overarching mission for this deep dive is to figure out if this freestanding, basically plug-and-play cabinet can legitimately deliver those clinical benefits of heat therapy directly to your house. Or, you know, if it is just an overpriced piece of heated furniture.
Right. Is it actually worth the hype?
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the specific medical science of infrared heat, which, by the way, we really need to dig into, let's lay out what this product physically is. Looking at the source imagery, it's a really handsome cabin.
It definitely doesn't look like medical equipment.
No, not at all. It's constructed from light natural Canadian hemlock wood. The front features this sleek, tinted, tempered glass door with a really thick vertical wooden handle. And peeking through that glass, you see a slatted wooden bench and these dark, rectangular carbon heating panels mounted on the interior walls and tucked under the bench.
Let's break down the physical footprint because, I mean, space is usually the first hurdle for anyone considering something like this.
Oh, for sure. Will it even fit my house?
Right. So the exterior dimensions are 6 feet 6 inches high, 3 feet 10 inches wide, and 3 feet 4 inches deep. And the interior gives you 5 feet 11 inches of standing room, 3 feet 7 inches of width, and just over 3 feet of depth.
Okay, so it's tall enough for most people to stand up in.
Yeah.
But the actual floor space it consumes isn't much larger than like an oversized armchair or maybe a small desk.
Exactly. It's surprisingly compact. But fully assembled, this unit weighs 258 pounds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so while it is technically freestanding, once you place it, you really need to treat it as a permanent indoor fixture. You won't be, you know, sliding a 250-pound wooden cabin across the carpet to vacuum behind it.
Which brings up a massive practical concern for me. Putting a functional high-heat sauna in a house usually means paying for really expensive rewiring.
Yep, the dreaded electrician bill.
Right. I mean, my hairdryer occasionally trips the circuit breaker in my bathroom if someone else turns on a vacuum in the hallway. How is it physically possible that an entire 2-person sauna runs without blowing the neighborhood power grid?
That's actually the most crucial engineering feat of this device. You literally don't need an electrician because the sauna is an ETL-listed device that plugs directly into a standard 110-volt, 15-amp household outlet.
Wait, really? A standard outlet?
A standard outlet. It manages this because those FAR infrared carbon panels are incredibly energy efficient compared to traditional electric heating elements.
Okay, so how does the traditional one work then?
Well, a traditional sauna heater uses brute force electrical resistance to superheat massive coils and heavy rocks, which requires a dedicated 240-volt line. But these carbon films operate at a much lower surface temperature, spreading a highly efficient, consistent electrical current across a really wide surface area.
That's wild. The exact same outlet you plug your television into can power a 145-degree cabin. No surprise contractor bills. That significantly lowers the barrier to entry.
It completely changes the game for home renters or anyone on a budget.
But okay, let's talk about that 145-degree number, because I know people are going to say, hey, this isn't the steam room at my local gym.
Right, and it's not trying to be. A traditional Finnish sauna works via convection. They use heated rocks and water to push the ambient air temperature up to anywhere from 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which is incredibly hot.
It is. The air gets superheated, and then that hot air eventually heats your skin.
Which honestly can feel intensely claustrophobic. Breathing 200-degree air is physically demanding on your lungs.
Oh, absolutely. It creates a high-stress environment for your cardiovascular system. But this Westinghouse unit abandons convection entirely. It utilizes 7 strategically placed carbon film FAR infrared heaters, capping the ambient air temperature at 145 degrees.
Okay, I sometimes see older or budget models using those ceramic rod heaters. Why specifically use carbon film panels here?
So ceramic rods get blisteringly hot, but they're narrow tubes. They emit heat from a very concentrated small surface area.
Right, so you get blasted in one specific spot.
Exactly. It creates intense hot spots right next to the rod and cold spots everywhere else in the cabin. Carbon film panels, on the other hand, are large flat sheets. By dispersing the heat across a much wider surface area, the carbon film gives you a lower surface temperature, but a highly even omnidirectional heat distribution.
So you don't end up with like one shoulder getting scorched while your toes are completely freezing.
Precisely. It's a much more comfortable, balanced heat.
But again, I can hear a traditionalist saying 145 degrees sounds lukewarm. If the air isn't aggressively hot, how does it actually trigger a physiological response? Like, how are you sweating?
What's fascinating here is the specific physics of FIR infrared light. Unlike traditional saunas that rely on heating the ambient air to indirectly heat your body, FI infrared wavelengths bypass the air almost entirely.
They bypass the air.
Yeah, they penetrate human tissue directly, up to 1.5 inches deep.
Okay, so the air in the cabin isn't doing the heavy lifting the invisible light waves are. Here's where it gets really interesting for me. I like to think about the difference between standing in a warming sunbeam on a crisp, cool autumn day versus stepping into a hot baking oven.
That's a really good analogy.
Right, because in the sunbeam, the air around you might be like 50 degrees, but you feel a deep internal warmth penetrating your skin because the sun's infrared radiation is hitting you directly. In the oven, you're just being cooked by the hot, circulating air. So this sauna is essentially bombarding you with that targeted sunbeam effect from every angle.
Exactly. That sunbeam analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of radiation versus convection. When those FAR infrared waves penetrate your skin, they actually match the vibrational frequency of the water molecules inside your cells.
Oh, wow. So it's working on a cellular level.
Yes. It causes those molecules to vibrate, creating friction and internal heat. The sources cite research published in the Canadian Family Physician detailing how this internal heat generation produces a vigorous, deep sweat at a much lower ambient temperature. Your core temperature rises from the inside out.
And because your core is heating up without your lungs having to pull in 200-degree air, your heart doesn't have to work as hard to cool your respiratory system.
Exactly. You experience significant vasodilation. So your blood vessels widen, improving circulation and lowering blood pressure without all that suffocating cardiovascular stress.
Which means, because you aren't fighting for air, you naturally end up staying in the cabin much longer to get those benefits. Like you might easily sit in there for 30 to 40 minutes.
Which is usually when the boredom sets in.
Right. Sitting in a silent wooden box for 40 minutes brings up a massive psychological hurdle. Absolute boredom. If you struggle to mentally switch off, just staring at a wooden wall is agonizing.
Yeah, the designers clearly anticipated that friction. The unit includes built-in Bluetooth speakers and an AUX input jack,
which totally transforms the experience. Being able to, pair your phone and listen to an audiobook, some music, or a guided meditation is what actually allows a hyper-connected modern person to build a consistent 40-minute daily routine.
For sure. One buyer actually noted an incredibly clever setup. They mounted a television on the wall outside the sauna, looked through that tempered glass door, and routed the audio through the internal Bluetooth speakers so they could hear it perfectly over the sound of their own sweat.
That is genius. I would totally do that. Beyond the audio, though, the cabin features chromotherapy LED lighting. So you have these specific colored lights illuminating the interior.
And the sources mention that blue tones are associated with a calming effect, while red tones are geared more toward energy.
Let's dig into the why there, because honestly, chromotherapy can sound a bit like pseudoscience at first glance. Like, how does a colored light bulb actually do anything to your body?
It's a fair question. It connects to the concept of photobiomodulation and how our eyes communicate with our brain's circadian clock.
Okay, so it's about wavelengths.
Right. Different colors of light have different wavelengths and frequencies. Blue light, for example, is highly prevalent in morning sunlight and actually suppresses melatonin, making us feel alert. But in a therapeutic setting with deep heat, Cool tones can visually reduce the psychological sensation of claustrophobia.
That makes sense. What about the red light?
Well, red light has a much longer wavelength, which doesn't disrupt melatonin production, so it allows your nervous system to remain in a parasympathetic, relaxed state, which is perfect if you were using the sauna right before bed.
So it adds a physical, environmental cue for your brain to accompany the heat. Furthermore, controlling all of this, the temperature, the timer, the lights, is done via a touch button LED control panel mounted directly on the inside of the cabin.
Which is huge. Placing the control panel inside is crucial for thermal efficiency.
Because otherwise you'd have to open the door, let all the trapped heat escape, and shock your system with cold air just to, add 5 minutes to your session.
Exactly. It ruins the whole experience.
Okay, now let's talk about the physical shell holding all this technology. The whole thing is made of Canadian hemlock wood. Why not use cheap plywood or particle board to keep the manufacturing costs down?
Well, think about it. A sauna is a brutal environment for any material. It constantly cycles through intense heat, human sweat, and moisture. Canadian hemlock is a dense, fine-grained softwood that is naturally antimicrobial and highly resistant to rot, mold, mildew, and warping.
But there is a biological hazard with cheaper materials too, isn't there?
A very significant one. Cheaper particle boards and plywoods are manufactured using synthetic glues and resins. When you expose those adhesives to 145-degree heat day after day, they begin to break down and off-gas volatile organic compounds.
Wait, VOCs? Like formaldehyde?
Yes, exactly like formaldehyde. You are stepping into this box to detoxify your body. The last thing you want is to take deep, expansive breaths in an enclosed space that is slowly leaking chemical byproducts into your lungs.
Yikes. Yeah, that completely defeats the purpose.
Hemlock ensures the air you breathe remains structurally clean.
You want a sauna, not a chemical hotbox. The features and the materials sound incredibly well thought out, but every product has real-world trade-offs. Let's weigh the absolute pros against the limitations.
The core advantages are firmly established, right? Zero need for an electrician, the deep penetrating heat from the omnidirectional carbon panels, the clean hemlock construction, and the multimedia integration. But the assembly process actually stands out as a really unique structural pro.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I first read freestanding cabin delivered to your house, my mind immediately pictured the most nightmarish flat-pack furniture assembly of my life. I assumed it would require 3 people and an entire weekend of frustration.
That's a very reasonable fear.
But multiple customers report that assembling this entire unit takes about 15 to 25 minutes.
For a 250-pound structure, that is remarkably fast.
It's insane. The sources indicate you basically just need the screwdriver. The walls utilize a buckle clasp system. So you set the floor down, stand the walls up, and literally lash them together.
That's so simple.
One reviewer even mentioned building it alongside their 7-year-old child. If a 7-year-old can actively assist in building a functioning sauna in under half an hour, the frustration threshold is practically non-existent.
The plug-and-play nature is undeniably appealing. However, we do have to examine the limitations here. As noted, the extreme weight means it is strictly for indoor use.
Right, you're not dragging this thing outside.
No, it's not portable and it is not weatherized. So placing it on an outdoor patio exposed to the rain is just out of the question. Additionally, the 145-degree temperature cap, while optimal for FI infrared therapy, will genuinely disappoint those traditional steam sauna purists who crave that aggressive, immediate blast of surface heat.
Yeah, if your ritual involves tossing a ladle of water over blistering hot rocks to create a cloud of steam, this dry heat mechanism will feel completely alien to you.
Totally. And this raises an important question regarding a highly specific technical limitation mentioned in the sources: EMF exposure. The documentation notes that this unit has an EMF rating of 22.
I had to push back on that number for a second, because 22 sounds completely arbitrary without context. What does it even mean to sit inside an electromagnetic field, and should you be worried about your cellular health here?
It's a great point. It requires a clear distinction between types of radiation. EMF stands for electromagnetic field. Any device that draws an electrical current from your refrigerator to your smartphone generates a non-ionizing electromagnetic field.
Okay, so it's not like an X-ray.
Exactly. Unlike ionizing radiation, like X-rays, which can actually damage DNA, non-ionizing EMFs are low-energy waves. The International Safety Guideline for continuous human exposure to magnetic fields is set at 2,000 milligauss.
Okay, so 2,000 milligauss is the safety ceiling.
Yes. For everyday context, sitting a few inches away from an active microwave oven might expose you to around 200 milligauss. A standard handheld hairdryer can generate over 300 milligauss right at the handle.
Wow.
And this sauna tests at an EMF rating of 22.
So the sauna you're sitting fully inside of is exposing you to a fraction of the electromagnetic field of the hairdryer you use on your head every morning.
Exactly. It operates at roughly 1% of the international safety limit. For the general population, 22 milligauss is considered completely safe.
But there's a caveat, right?
There is. The premium, ultra-low EMF sauna brands, companies like Clearlight, engineer their proprietary shielding to test between 0.12 and 1.63 milligauss. They push the number as close to absolute zero as physically possible.
So while 22 is mathematically safe by a wide margin, if you are a highly EMF-sensitive buyer who wants clinical grade, absolute minimization, this unit's rating is a measurable con.
It really highlights where the cost savings come from. You're getting excellent performance, but you're giving up that final few percent of extreme technological optimization.
Which makes sense. With the technical pros and cons laid out, let's look at how these specifications translate to the actual human beings who bought and assembled this unit. What are the real-world reviews revealing?
Well, the general consensus is highly positive. It currently holds a 4.6 out of 5 stars rating across 31 verified reviews.
For a large ticket freight item, maintaining a 4.6 is a pretty solid indicator of quality control. What specific benefits are buyers highlighting?
A reviewer named Brett specifically called out the longevity, noting he has used the unit for several years and it still performs perfectly, which really validates the durability of that hemlock wood.
That's reassuring.
Yeah. Another buyer, Amy from Massachusetts, highlighted a highly specific physiological benefit. She utilizes it to manage seasonal affective disorder during the dark, freezing winters.
I can totally see that. If you are enduring a harsh Massachusetts February, stepping into a 145-degree glowing box of light and deep penetrating heat is a profound shift for your nervous system. It creates like an artificial restorative summer environment.
It really does. And another user named Andreg confirmed the incredibly fast 15-minute assembly time we discussed, but he also provided a very practical operational detail. He noted that the carbon panels take about 20 minutes to fully warm up to the maximum temperature.
Ah, okay. So you can't just step into it cold. You turn it on, go drink a glass of water, do some light stretching, and let the cabin build that internal heat. But looking through the sources, I noticed it wasn't a universally flawless experience.
Yeah.
There's a crucial warning we need to pass along.
Yeah, that's an important one. One buyer reported unpacking the unit and finding a floor panel with a wet, mold-like discoloration spot, roughly a square foot in size.
Given the packaging constraints, this appears to be a warehouse storage or shipping moisture issue, rather than a manufacturing defect of the wood itself. Still, if you order this, you must inspect every single panel the moment it comes off the freight truck.
Do not sign the delivery driver's paperwork until you have verified the condition of the wood. Because if you assemble the entire cabin and then realize the floor panel is compromised by warehouse mold, the return process becomes incredibly difficult.
Absolutely. So, taking the carbon heater technology, the rapid assembly, the EMF context, and the customer feedback together, who is the exact right person to confidently purchase this?
Let's synthesize the ideal user profile. This product is engineered for the individual who wants regular daily access to the science-backed benefits of FA or infrared therapy, specifically things like muscle recovery, joint pain reduction, and cardiovascular conditioning.
And it accommodates 2 people, so that 3-foot 7-inch wide interior is ideal if you have a partner to share the sessions with.
Fundamentally, it is for the buyer who possesses about 4 feet by 3.5 feet of permanent indoor floor space near a standard 110-volt outlet, and who really wants to eliminate the friction and ongoing expense of commuting to a commercial spa.
The deal breakers are equally clear, though. If you live in a cramped apartment where floor space is scarce, skip this. If your vision involves an outdoor sauna next to the snowy woods, this indoor-only unit will just be destroyed by the elements.
Yep.
And if your body specifically craves 200-degree finished steam heat, that 145-degree cap will leave you completely unsatisfied. Finally, if your medical protocol demands a near-zero EMF environment below 2 milligauss, you need to budget for an ultra-premium brand.
It requires aligning the physics of the product with your specific environmental and physiological needs.
So what does this all mean? When we evaluate the big picture, the Westinghouse 2-person Bluetooth-compatible FR infrared sauna represents a highly practical entry point into home wellness. It deliberately trades the clinical-grade, zero EMS specifications of luxury brands for sheer convenience, energy efficiency, and a shockingly frictionless assembly process.
And the economics heavily favor the consumer here. Depending on the retailer, the sources list the price around CAD $4,559.
Which is a fraction of a home renovation.
Oh, totally. When you factor in the high-quality Canadian hemlock construction, the wide dispersion carbon heating system, and the fact that you avoid paying thousands of dollars for dedicated electrical wiring, it emerges as a genuinely worthwhile long-term investment.
It essentially delivers the spa experience directly to your spare bedroom without the associated construction drama. If this sounds like the missing piece in your home health routine, click the link in the description below to check the latest price, availability, and buy the product today.
And before we wrap up, I want you to consider this final thought on human behavior. We talked at the beginning about the massive barrier to entry for self-care. Think about how much friction dictates whether or not you actually stick to a healthy habit.
That's a really good point.
If you have to pack a gym bag, drive 20 minutes through traffic, find parking, and pay a premium just for a 20-minute sweat session, the friction almost guarantees you will eventually abandon the routine.
The logistics just completely defeat the intention.
Exactly. But imagine if that exact same cellular heat therapy, that exact same parasympathetic nervous system release is permanently sitting in your basement. It requires no commute, no scheduling, and no additional fees. It is simply waiting for you to walk in and press a button.
Right.
How dramatically could removing all of that external friction transform your long-term physical and mental health over the next 5 years?
You essentially turn an occasional high-effort luxury into an effortless daily ritual. You don't need the billionaire's glacial cold plunge to get the billionaire's recovery routine. You just need a spare wall outlet, 15 minutes with a screwdriver, and the willingness to sweat.